In Cape Town's underworld, one name keeps coming back again and again in headlines, court papers, and whispered conversations: Jerome Donkie Booysen. For years, police officials, prosecutors, and organized crime analysts have described him as an alleged gang boss, the alleged leader of the Sexy Boys gang, and a central figure in battles over nightclub security and extortion. He has been shot at multiple times, wounded more than once, and survived what media reports describe as at least half a dozen assassination attempts in just over a year. His name appears wherever you find stories about Cape Town's nightclub wars, protection rackets, and violent feuds. But if you listen to Jerome Donkie Booysen himself, you hear a very different story. He insists he is a businessman, a rugby man, a family and community figure, not the powerful crime boss he is made out to be. In interviews, he denies being a kingpin, distances himself from gangsterism, and portrays himself as a man who has been unfairly targeted, both by bullets and by reputation. Between these two versions of him lies a complicated life story, set against the backdrop of one of the most beautiful and most deeply unequal cities in the world. This is the fact-based, on-record story of Jerome Donkie Booysen, drawn from court documents, police statements, and reputable media reporting. It does not claim to know everything, and it does not take gossip as truth. It follows what has been written down, under oath or in print, and it takes seriously the principle that everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Long before he was linked to the underworld, Jerome Booysen's life looked like that of many men on the Cape Flats, shaped by hardship, but also by sport, family, and routine work. He grew up in an area created by apartheid's forced removals, where communities were pushed out of the inner city and dumped on the margins. Those neighborhoods were marked by poverty and violence, but they were also places of resilience, with strong local clubs, churches, and social networks. As a young man, Booysen was known not for gang activity, but for rugby. Media reports have described him as a star rugby back in his youth, a talented player who made a name for himself on the field. In later years, he became president of the Belhar Rugby Football Club, a position of local respect and responsibility. On the touchlines and training fields, he was seen as a rugby man, not as an underworld figure. At the same time, he was employed in a steady, unglamorous job. For around 20 years, according to reporting, Jerome Booysen worked as a building inspector for the city of Cape Town. It was the kind of job where you deal with plans, inspections, and municipal rules. A world of paperwork and site visits far removed from the high drama of gang wars. One article described that period of his life as anonymous, a time when he went about his business without attracting the attention of the wider country. Rugby remained part of his family identity. In later years, his son Joel would also be associated with the sport, appearing in rugby structures and mentioned in reports as a promising player. To many in the community, the Booysens were linked as much to the rugby field as to anything else. So how does a city inspector and club president later become branded in court papers and media stories as an alleged gang kingpin at the heart of Cape Town's underworld? To answer that, you have to understand the world that grew up around Cape Town's nightlife and the contest to control it. In the late 1990s and 2000s, Cape Town's nightlife scene exploded. Stylish clubs, bars, and lounges sprang up in the central business district in Greenpoint, along Long Street and the Atlantic seaboard. They became hotspots for tourists, wealthy locals, and anyone chasing status, music, and late nights. With the money and crowds came another factor: security. Organized crime reports and risk assessments describe how underworld figures, including the notorious Cyril Beaker, are alleged to have built protection rackets around these venues. The structure was simple and effective. If you owned a club, you were strongly encouraged to use a particular security company. Refusing could mean harassment, damage, or threats. Accepting meant you paid for protection, whether you wanted it or not. The bouncers at your door were sometimes as much about control as they were about safety. Over time, new names joined this environment. Media reports and official documents repeatedly mention a number of figures linked to the nightclub and security world. Businessman Mark Liffman, bouncer boss Andre Naudet, and Jerome Donkie Booysen, described in many reports as the alleged leader of the Sexy Boys gang. These men are often portrayed as heading or representing rival factions, all seeking influence over the same pool of clubs, contracts, and territories. Investigative pieces claim that some of these groups were accused of forcing their security services on businesses, setting up patterns of extortion dressed up as protection. Club owners could find themselves caught between competing networks, each insisting that they were the rightful protectors. At stake was not just the income from security itself, but the broader control that comes with having your people at a venue's doors and inside its walls. In this landscape, police and analysts began to describe Jerome Donkie Booysen as an underworld power player, a man with influence both in Cape Flats gang structures and in the lucrative nightclub security racket. His name appeared more frequently in crime reports and intelligence assessments. The state's picture was of a veteran gang leader who had expanded from street-level territory into the glamorous world of nightlife and extortion. But from Booysen's perspective, this portrayal was distorted. In a 2018 interview, he rejected the label of kingpin and argued that the police and media had exaggerated his role. He emphasized his background in rugby and business, presenting himself as someone who had worked in formal jobs and in the community. He also made a point of saying that gangsterism was not the way forward, framing his message as a warning to younger people tempted by that life. In his telling, he was a man being hunted and misrepresented, not the all-powerful boss of legend. As these two narratives clashed, the tension around Cape Town's underworld began to spill into increasingly visible violence. What had once been whispered about in side streets and back rooms began to erupt in public spaces, with Jerome Donkie Booysen frequently at the center. The first major wave of public attention around his personal safety came in May 2017. On a single night, at least 6 people were shot in a series of attacks in and around Cape Town. Media reports described these shootings as underworld-linked, part of an ongoing turf war. Among those wounded was Jerome Booysen. He was shot in the neck in Ravensmead, a suburb on the Cape Flats. According to reports, he was on his way to visit another suspected gang leader who had himself been shot and would later die. Police confirmed the Ravensmead attack and opened attempted murder cases. In the news, Booysen was described as an alleged Sexy Boys gang boss and an alleged Cape Town gang leader. He was taken to hospital, treated for his injuries, and at one point described as doing well and expected to recover. For many people outside the Cape Flats, this was the first time his name really registered. It was more than just a gang note on a crime blotter. It was a serious, targeted shooting tied by media to broader tensions. But for those following the underworld, it looked like a sign that long-running conflicts were now erupting in more open ways. Just a few months later, in October 2017, the violence would move onto an even bigger stage: Cape Town International Airport. On the morning of the 18th of October, gunfire broke out near the airport's drop-and-go area, a place where families say goodbye, travelers rush to make flights, and tourists arrive. Within hours, reports identified Jerome Donkie Booysen as the apparent target. He was wounded in the attack, some reports say up to 4 times, and rushed once again to hospital. At least one other person was wounded in the crossfire. The fact that such an attack could take place at a national key point shocked the country. Questions were raised in Parliament and in the media about how an alleged underworld hit could be carried out in such a sensitive space. Commentators connected the airport shooting to the same web of nightclub disputes and rivalries that had already spilled into earlier shootings around Stellenbosch and Cape Town. The message seemed clear. The people behind these conflicts were willing to act in broad daylight in places that symbolized national infrastructure, with little apparent fear of consequences. The war for control was being waged in full view. By late 2017, Jerome Donkie Booysen was no longer just a name in police intelligence files. He had become a symbol of Cape Town's underworld battles, a man linked in the public imagination to a chain of spectacular attacks. And the attempts on his life were not over. In early 2018, another incident was reported, this time in Mitchell's Plain, one of the largest suburbs on the Cape Flats. Community radio and local news outlets stated that Booysen had survived yet another attempt on his life when gunmen opened fire on his bulletproof car at around 8 in the evening. According to those accounts, the bullets struck the reinforced glass and bodywork, but did not penetrate. People quoted in the reports described this as the 4th attempt on his life in less than 12 months. Once again, he survived. Police confirmed shootings in the area, though not every detail of the attack was made public at the time. A pattern was emerging. Wherever you saw the name Jerome Donkie Booysen, you often saw words like target, shooting, attempted hit, and underworld feud in the same breath. On the 1st of August 2018, another attack pushed the story back into the news cycle. This time, the setting was a shopping mall in Quills River, specifically a family restaurant in Soneke Mall. Reports say that Booysen was having lunch at a Spur restaurant, a chain known for its family-friendly atmosphere. Birthday songs, kids' play areas, and casual meals. As he left the restaurant with his bodyguards, 2 gunmen reportedly opened fire near the entrance. In the chaos, he was shot in the arm and wounded. Once again, he survived. Police sources described this as another attempted hit, and media outlets reported that this was believed to be the 6th time in 15 months that he had narrowly escaped death. In at least one report, his lawyer stated that Booysen returned fire in self-defense and that one of the suspected attackers was killed in the exchange. This pattern of survival captured the imagination of reporters and readers alike. It wasn't just that he had been shot. It was that he kept being shot at, kept being targeted, and kept coming back. A striking phrase began to appear in headlines and commentary: the donkey with 9 lives. By mid-2018, Jerome Donkie Booysen had become shorthand for a man who simply would not die in the way his enemies apparently intended. To some, this made him legendary. To others, it underlined just how difficult it was for the state to get to the top of the alleged criminal hierarchy, even in the middle of sustained violence. But these attacks were not happening in isolation. They were part of a larger, messier picture. The struggle for power within Cape Town's underworld. Investigations and long-form articles connected Booysen's story to a wider turf war involving other prominent names. Alleged underworld boss Nafiz Modak appeared often in these stories, portrayed as part of a rival faction competing for control over security contracts at clubs and restaurants. Businessman Mark Liffman and bouncer boss Andre Naudet were also repeatedly mentioned, associated with security companies and groups of bouncers who worked certain venues. These men, along with alleged gang leaders like Jerome Donkie Booysen, were described as being on different sides of a complex, shifting conflict over who would dominate Cape Town's nightlife economy. Reports spoke of battles over which security company controlled which club, who had the right to protect certain streets, and who got a share of the money flowing through these venues. Extortion allegations surfaced, with some business owners claiming they were pressured or threatened. The shootings of various underworld figures, including the attacks on Booysen himself, were often linked in commentary to this escalating tug-of-war over money and influence. Throughout all of this, one fact stood out. Jerome Donkie Booysen remained alive. Time after time, he appeared at court, at funerals, and in public places, even after being wounded. To some observers, this ability to survive made him seem untouchable. To others, it underlined the level of risk and danger that surrounded him and everyone associated with him. Some summaries in the press suggest that he has been shot at 5 or more times in less than a year and has dodged death 6 times in 15 months. The exact count depends on the criteria you use, but one conclusion is hard to escape. He has survived multiple documented assassination attempts. It is this pattern that led to the nickname in headlines, the donkey with 9 lives. Through all of this, Jerome Donkie Booysen has continued to insist on his own version of events. In interviews, he paints himself as a man whose reputation has been inflated into something he does not recognize. He leans on his history as a rugby player, a club president, and a city employee. He talks about being a businessman rather than a gang boss. He tells young people that gangsterism is not the future. To him, the kingpin label is not only wrong, but dangerous because it justifies state and public hostility and may make him a more attractive target for enemies. At the same time, organized crime assessments and local crime reports keep placing him among the central figures of Cape Town's underworld. They describe him as an alleged leader of the Sexy Boys gang, as a key player in protection rackets and nightclub security, and as a man whose name has appeared repeatedly in connection with extortion and violence. In these texts, he is not an ordinary businessman, but a central node in a network of power, fear, and money. Between these two sharply different images stands the justice system. On one side, the state brings charges and allegations, builds cases, and calls witnesses. On the other, Booysen and his lawyers contest those claims, challenge evidence, and insist on his innocence. As of the latest public information, some of the most serious matters against him are still being heard. Verdicts have not yet been delivered. So where do things stand now? What can be said about Jerome Donkie Booysen based on what is documented rather than rumored? He is alive, despite years of being identified as the target in multiple shootings. He has been wounded, sometimes seriously, and yet has recovered again and again. He is an accused person in major ongoing trials, including the alleged Mandrake Syndicate case and the Weinstein murder case. In those matters, he has not been convicted, and he maintains his innocence. He has been described repeatedly by police and crime analysts as the alleged leader of the Sexy Boys gang and as a major underworld figure. He, in turn, describes himself as a businessman and community man who has been unfairly labeled and hunted. Everything beyond that belongs in the realm of rumor, legend, and speculation. Streets, bars, and prison yards are full of stories about underworld figures. Stories of money, violence, betrayal, and power. Some of those stories may contain truth. Others are exaggerated or completely invented. They are not the basis of this narration. The story of Jerome Donkie Booysen is also a story about Cape Town itself. It is about a city where shining tourist attractions stand next to neighborhoods struggling with poverty and gang violence. It is about a place where rugby fields and community halls sit side by side with territories claimed by gangs. It is about a nightlife economy where glamorous venues exist alongside allegations of extortion and forced security. It is about how lines blur between businessman and gangster, between rumor and fact, between survival and myth. In Booysen's case, the label of underworld boss continues to exist alongside his own claim to be something very different. Courts will continue to hear evidence. Journalists will continue to report. Communities will continue to feel the impact of violence and fear. One thing, however, is clear. Jerome Donkie Booysen has become one of South Africa's most well-known and most frequently targeted alleged underworld figures. His survival through multiple assassination attempts has made him into a symbol, whether he wants that or not. A symbol of a criminal underworld that is deeply entwined with everyday life, and of a justice system still grappling with how to deal with those who are alleged to stand at its top. As we reach the end of this story, one thing should stand out clearly. Behind the headlines, the shootouts, and the court cases, there is a real city, real families, and a very real struggle over power, money, and survival. Jerome Donkie Booysen's life, as it appears in public records, is a collision point between two worlds: the world of rugby fields, steady jobs, and local clubs, and the world of alleged gangs, extortion, nightclub wars, and high-profile criminal trials. The state and its investigators have painted him as an alleged underworld boss. He describes himself as a businessman and community man who has been misjudged and hunted. Somewhere between those two pictures lies the full truth, and for now, that truth is still being contested in courtrooms and investigations, not in YouTube videos or streets. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps Shadowline continue creating deep-dive true crime content. Share your thoughts or case suggestions in the comments. Shadowline reads every one. Subscribe for more true crime